Discussion. We're going to be talking about probably the most divided film of the year so far. And by the way, that's Thunder, if you're wondering. So, but today we're talking about It Comes at Night.
Yeah, it's are we doing spoilers?
Yeah, so
okay,
tell
so
them
we're doing spoilers. It's an post-apocalyptic type of world, but with literally no exposition at all. We have no idea what's going on. All we know is there's just some kind of sickness that once it gets hold of people, they die in pretty much a day, and then that's it. So like that's. And it focuses on this one family. Joel Edgerton, do you know who the mom and the kid are?
No,
okay, well, a family of a dad, a son who's like in his teens, and a mom.
Okay.
And the movie starts with like their grandfather dying, sort of like, and that shows the sickness that they have to pretty much just take him out right away. He's all really gross and like got those like warts on him and stuff like that. And then they burn him. And like that's pretty much all the explanation of what's going on you get. And it's a really dark movie. Most of it takes place in this house or in this cabin, I guess. And it's just the way it's shot is amazing. Everything's just kind of done through this house, and it's a really great movie. The trailers, because it's a really weird movie, it's hard to market. So that's why the trailers didn't really. It kind of confused a lot of people. It looked like just kind of a normal. Like scary movie, and it's definitely not at all. It's not your ordinary sort of scary film. So anyway, what do you want to start with, Nick? How it was shot?
Yeah, I'll say that for me, probably the first thing that stood out about this film is that it's amazingly well directed. Like, a lot of the shots look great. There's this great feeling of like throughout the film. There's this feeling of like absolute dread throughout, and you feel. And not to mention the fact that like there's this that like that because it takes place in an almost kind of secluded location in this forest, it also kind of creates a feeling of desolation and loneliness.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of this movie sort of on its own, even when the characters are kind of not like. Because a lot of the movie focuses on the son who's in his teens, and he in his dreams. Because he has like night terrors a lot, I guess, or like really scary nightmares.
And it happens mostly when something traumatic happens, like after witnessing his grandfather die, or events that happen later on in the film. That's usually what sparks these dreams, and it's mostly because of the fact that that this boy is incredibly traumatized by what he's seeing.
Yeah, he definitely is. He definitely shows a lot of like he's having trouble coping with it, and that's sort of how the whole vehicle of the story's like sort of what everything's kind of told through. And then and it's great just how it's all shot, sort of how the camera follows him, goes from part to part of the house. It just shows it really closed in and isolated, while at the same time making just this single house seem like it's got so many different areas and pathways and all that, because he kind of travels through like the attic and everywhere else. And it's one of those movies where like rather than like it's post-apocalyptic, so they have to fight zombies or do stuff like that all the time, sort of filled with doing a lot of like stuff that would kind of be like survival based things, like, oh, we have to go board up this wall, we have to get these gas masks, we have to go get food. It's more, I guess, realistic in a like it's based on like what you would actually have to do in that situation. And then sort of the big curveball that comes in is how another family gets thrown. And it gets thrown by just the dad breaking into their house of the other family, the dad of the other family breaking into the house, just trying to find food. And, the way that goes about, because the son's, we think he was sleepwalking at first, but he was just, or he could have been. That's sort of the great thing about his sleepwalking. It's really, uncertain when he's sometimes you kind of wonder when is he not sleepwalking, but dreaming, or is he sleepwalking, or is he actually awake for all of these? What could have happened? So then another family comes in, and then sort of the rest of this things, because eventually they decide after a lot of uncertainty and unsure, who this guy is, they eventually start working together, living in the same area to kind of make themselves stronger, and then things slowly start to fall apart. But how do you think they handled it? Just the other family sort of coming in.
I thought they handled it well. Like, really liked how, like, I also really liked how, like, you kind of, how like they kind of add this feeling of like, oh, how like they make the family, because even the scenes when they're like kind of being friends with the other family have you feel a bit unease because Joel Edgerton says like, I'll make sure, you could stay here and live here for a while, but if you do anything that's going to threaten my son, I'll kill you.
Yeah, that's sort of the whole thing the entire time. They're all really nice people, and they have these really nice moments with each other, like when they're all eating dinner, kind of laughing about stuff, or the little kids doing something like kind of funny. They really do make this family, like the other family, really likable and good people. Then there's just the whole time the movie's going, there's these little things that kind of, you're kind of thrown into the position of both families. Like, do you really trust these people? Because you don't know really much. Like, there's one part earlier on, the one guy talks about his brother, and then later on they sort of doesn't actually, like, then later on he says he's an only child, and then it says, oh yeah, he's actually my brother-in-law, he just felt like a brother to me, and you just, that kind of throws you, you're like, maybe this guy doesn't have a brother, what else is he wrong for that? And that just slowly kind of builds and builds until this one sleepwalking thing that, that's the one son had, that the son of the main family has, who, this one, he has a dream, and then he wakes up and he sees, or we're uncertain if he wakes up and sees that, but he sees the kid, the other kid out there, like the small, the young son, the toddler.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, of the main kid of like the other family, brings them back to the room because he sort of was just asleep in the middle of the house. So he brings them back to the other family's room, and we find out that, and now we don't, and then the dog shows up out of nowhere.
Oh, you want to talk about like how like because like. To get some background, there's a moment where, like, the dog, for some reason, just starts barking at something. We don't see what it is. We don't know what exactly he's looking at, and he just runs into the forest, and they try looking for him, but they can't find him. And then, but then later on in the night, he comes back, and before you ask, we don't know how he got back into the house, other than, like, we find that the red door, which is, in the film, kind of symbolic of, like, I kind of see as symbolic of the son's whole trauma throughout the events of the film, open, and they go in there, they find the dog alive, but he's incredibly wounded.
Yeah, it's sort of that red door, it's just kind of like, that's why it shows like the house is sort of so condensed and kind of creepy, and with all these little things, while at the same time, everything outside just seems terrible. Like, a lot of the time when they go outside, they have to throw on gas masks, but they really don't know when those gas masks are going to help or when they ever need them. So yeah, that red door sort of was like the barrier that sort of kept them safe. And and then at points, it's open. And then they see the dog come in out of nowhere. And just then the dog's really sick. And that's sort of the starting point where things sort of go wrong. And I think they really handle how the two families sort of break apart after that.
Yeah, but before we talk about that, let's talk about how like this film handled a trope that has unfortunately kind of plagged a lot of horror films nowadays, where they kill
in horror movies. But this one, it was really shocking and kind of like definitely went. I could have called it that this dog wasn't making out of it, which sucks because you could tell the kid and the dog are really close, but he just. He just starts out of nowhere, just starts barking at something, and takes off, and you just know, this poor dog's.
What do you think the dog saw out there?
Yeah, that's the great thing about this movie. There's so many there's so many of those things where it's like, I don't know what happened here, or I don't know why this happened, because there's no exposition, so we have no idea what's causing this. Is it like an actual like monster that's doing this to people? Is it a sickness? Did the dog just see the illness, like how dogs can see maybe other things before people can, like why it went after it?
Here's the interpretation I got. I think the dog saw something out there incredibly traumatic, and it set him off, and then he was trying to get back in the house to warn the family, but in the process he gets wounded because you know how the doors are boarded up. I presume he just jumped through, but severely injuring himself, and as you see, he's bleeding to death. And so the option is that Joel Edgerton, the father, decides to euthanize the dog, which, much to the distraught of the son, who's really close, because the difference. it means, you know,
Yeah,
shooting
sure.
the
I
head.
guess I maybe, but yeah. The main point is, yeah, he does kill the. Do you think so? You don't think the dog actually got sick? You think he
Yeah, I
just
think-
hurt himself?
I think, yeah, maybe
I think
that's-
that was the illness. I think the illness, just whatever it is, just really messed up that dog. Because I don't know, like you see in the grandfather before. This is why, like, this is the exposition of the movie. At the beginning, it's just the grandfather looking awful and disgusting because he's just got this worst illness you could like, sickness you can imagine. That I don't know. That seemed like what the dog was.
And-
Yeah, definitely handled it. It's just a huge feeling of dread the entire movie. Like, you can tell something's about to go wrong, and when finally the distrust happens, when they realize someone opened the door, and the one family thinks it's the little kid that the teenage son saw sleepwalking, and the other family does. They're both who did this, and that's a great.
Also, I want to talk about how, like,
because then they separate, and then that tension builds. What are they doing in the other room? What are they doing? Are they going to take our food? Are they going to take our food? And it just keeps building and building.
And
so,
and going back to, like, one thing I'll say is that this is definitely the best performance I've seen from Joel Edgerton, in my opinion, because because this is a man, and along with his wife, who are people who are trying desperately to protect their son. It's just the fact that the methods that they do so in order to keep him safe is questionable. But here's the thing, you understand why. For me, probably a pivotal moment of this, and this is a very subtle scene, is that a scene where him and the other father get like attacked on the road by presumably two guys who are trying to rob them, and like during the scuffle he shoots and kills one of the guys, and like after this you see his hand shake. Like you see that he's basically, you see that this is somebody who's probably not comfortable with committing these acts of violence, but he feels it's necessary to keep his son safe.
Yeah, apparently he was a history teacher. That's what they say in the movie, that's what he was beforehand. You kind of realize he just, like, he wasn't, this isn't what he does, but he's completely like into it. And I think that's how you sort of see when things sort of divulge at the end, like the one family just trying to leave, and then Joel Edgerton's family stopping them at all costs when they realize that the little kid's probably sick.
Yeah, I
but
think
that
he's
means
sick.
that that the teenage son is sick too, because we see him like that at the end, and things fall apart, and eventually how do they think they really handled things just falling apart, because everyone was just really scared there, and I think the director did a great job building the tension. The way it was shot, you don't get to see where everyone is at all times in every shot, so when someone pops in out of nowhere with a gun or whatever, it's really cool like that. I think you could either this or Get Out could be the best shot movie of the year.
Yeah, and for me, one thing that I really was surprised is that throughout the film, they have a lot of steady shots, but only towards like one moment a bit towards the end where you see a bit of shaky cam. And why is it that like towards the end you see a bit of shaky cam, whereas the rest of the film is so
yeah, I know, so steady and kind of the way they do look through the hallways and that type of thing. Just because I think that's when everyone was starting to lose their cool. Everything was kind of calm and collected for most of the movie. We were just doing like procedures, and then once we don't know who got sick, that's when both families start breaking apart, and everyone start killing they start attacking each other, and things fall apart, and it eventually just goes really bad. One family gets killed, and the other one, their son gets sick, and because they So do you think? And that's really the great way to look. Do you think that the night terrors weren't just that, or like all the bad dreams for the teenage son? Do you think that was that he's actually do you think he was infected beforehand? Because his dreams were messed up. Like the one mom that he was, the other family's mom, he's kind of attracted to.
Yeah, that was for me probably the most unsettling
really
dream.
Yeah, she has like blood drips from her and goes on him, and in his dream, or like he's with his grandfather. When he sees his grandfather's all of a sudden in a ton of pain and really sick. Do you think he was sick before? And this is just him giving the illness to other people?
Maybe. We don't really know. And also, there are two things I also want to say is how you could also kind of see, like, It Comes at Night as essentially, like, because another thing you could kind of see the title It Comes at Night as kind of like a metaphor, as in fear and paranoia, rather than some monster. I think that's ultimately the reason to why the meaning behind the title. For me, it's mostly just the fact that to me, much like John Carpenter's The Thing, is that it's a story that's basically about fear and mistrust and how like it can tear people apart to the point where towards the end, despite Joel Edgerton and his wife doing everything they can to keep their son safe, at the end they weren't able to save him because he just dies from the disease. And for me, probably my favorite moment of the entire film is like the final shot where it's just Joel Edgerton and his wife just sitting down on a table, and their son is gone, and they both just kind of realize that everything that they've done was just kind of worth nothing. It was just that it's both not only really thought-provoking, but also kind of heartbreaking, because you just realize that they just sacrificed innocent lives, and all so they could keep their own son safe, but at the end, all that sacrifice was worth for nothing because his death was inevitable.
Yeah, it's definitely that just no matter what they did, it didn't work. And that's the great thing about that last shot. It just shows them, like, both the parents, one shot at the table, and, just looking completely miserable because there's nothing they can do. And then it just ends. No monsters, no big action scenes, no crazy chase. It's just, that's it. And I think that's the best thing. So my overall final thoughts are, it's a really great movie. A great shot, great directed, great acted. Everyone's really does a great job looking paranoid and frustrated the whole time. Joel Edgerton, probably the best of them, and that's why I'm going to give this movie a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, if you want my thoughts, for me, before I give my final thoughts, I do want to point out the fact that this film is pretty divided, and I can't understand why. Like, I know that
the trailers made no sense, so the audience didn't.
Because, like, I know that a lot of people were saying that. I know, and for me, this is kind of something that really annoys me, particularly like when Chris Stuckman reviewed the film, saying that it didn't make sense, and it's just kind of your typical post-apocalyptic movie, which I like Stuckman too, but this is probably one of the reviews where I disagree with him heavily.
Yeah, but what's your thoughts then?
In my opinion, this is definitely one of the best films of the year, and definitely one of the best horror films of the decade, because it's well shot, it's legitimately frightening, it's legitimately intense. It has this great feeling of dread, and not to mention the fact that, like, the story pretty much that shows that it doesn't have to have monsters or big or something supernatural to be scary. The idea itself is more so about watching a family tear itself apart, and it's basically a story about what happens when fear and paranoia can destroy human beings, and that's why I'm going to give It Comes at Night a 9 out of 10.
Okay, yeah, so really positive review here. Next one we see could be Baby Driver,
could be Apes.
Yeah,
both
of those.
Looking forward to Apes.
I want to see both of them, so we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.